Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Well, as many of you know, I recently turned 40, and for my birthday, my husband and I had plans to go to New Orleans to celebrate with my relatives. But of course, the stars did not align to my favor because for the last couple of years, we have had some severe floor problems. And while we have been trying to find a person to take care of those problems, we finally landed on someone who we felt could do a good job. And it just so happened that the weekend of my birthday was the weekend that these workers could start on our floor. So, unfortunately, I had to adult and cancel plans in New Orleans and get everything taken care of here, which the workers did an amazing job. And it just really feels like a brand new home in there. So, very, very happy about that. And since we had to cancel, we are planning to go to New Orleans later this month. But for my birthday, Carrie surprised me and took me over to Jackson, which is about an hour away. And with this being such short notice, he did end up planning some really cool things that I really have to give him kudos for because he thought outside of the box and he thought quick. But the first thing we did was he took me to this type of wellness spa that does like all these really cool new age things. They had like a float tank and they did crystals and gems and working with those, and they had a Reiki master there. And he ended up scheduling me an appointment with the Reiki master where I ended up laying on this really comfortable table, very couch like. And of course, I have aches and pains, as just about any 40-year-old does. And the Reiki master came in and started laying her hands on me and hovering her hands above me. I didn't ever really tell her where I was hurting or anything, but I did feel relief in the areas where her hands went. And what was really trippy was the idea that it felt like I was levitating. Like, yeah, I could still feel the bed cot thing under me. I could totally feel that. But at the same time, I just had this really odd sensation like I was floating. And it just felt so light. It felt so positive. And after I left there, I felt completely zenned out for the rest of the day and just had a really great experience. But what was really cool was when Carrie and I got back in the car, I still listen to my iPod. It's one of those classic iPod shuffles, and I keep it on just random songs. So, anyway, we get in the car, crank it up, and the very first song that comes on is Coldplay's Green Eyes, which was not a popular song from my understanding. But one of the lyrics of the song was, I came with a heavy load and things have been lighter since I met you. And that's just me paraphrasing. I'm sure I'm screwing up some of the words, but that's what it was. And we looked at each other and was like, wow, okay. So I might be a skeptic on quite a few things, but I do try to keep an open mind. And I feel like that was a good sign. But after we left there, we ended up going to the Mississippi Museum of Art, which they had this really beautiful emotional display in regards to quilting and the Black community. And after looking at the quilts and just seeing how the designs were so very different and unique, we began seeing quilts that detailed the individual's life who worked on that piece. And it was very much like a diary. And even though there were tons of quilts that were beautiful with their design, the ones that acted like a diary were so very emotional, and it was just an experience like no other. So I was very thrilled to go there. I've always wanted to quilt, but I will never be anywhere near as good as the quilts that we saw at that museum. And if you're in the Mississippi area, I believe they have the display going on until about the 18th of April. So definitely go check that out because it was an experience. And after that, we ended up going to this cool little place called Broad Street Cafe, where we ended up just pigging out and having a good time. And attached to that is a bookstore called Lemuria, which we ended up raiding. And following that, we went to a used bookstore that I love. And then we went to this really cool gaming tavern called the Dog Mud Tavern, and it was so cool because they have like all of this fantasy, sci-fi, horror just conglomerated together. And while you sit there and eat and drink, you can play board games or play like Super Nintendo. So it was a lot of fun. But anywho, that is everything we ended up doing for my birthday. And now it's time to show off the goodies that I received, which I'm going to start off with a few non book items. And first up is the present that means the most to me. So, what I'm about to show off is an album that my little cousin and I used to listen to all the time. We would ride around town singing the lyrics to this album, and it's an album that's very emotional to me. And when I discovered this was on vinyl, I immediately said, I have to have this. And Carrie was sweet enough to get it for me. But this is the vinyl of A Boy Named Goo by the Goo Goo Dolls. And the song that my cousin and I truly bonded over on this album was, of course, I kind of getting emotional here talking about it, but we bonded over the song Name, which is a very, very sweet song. And of course, we would sing along with everything on here, but Name and God Naked, that was another one we always would definitely sing our hearts out to, just riding around. And I wish she was still here, but unfortunately, a nasty wreck took her at a very young age. But this means the world to me right here. I've already listened to it. Sounds perfect. Love it. So that's the best birthday present I received this year. Next up is another vinyl record, which is Smoke in the Shadows by Lydia Lunch. Now, I'm a huge Lydia Lunch fan. I have enjoyed her ever since she was in Teenage Jesus and the Jerks. And out of her albums, which her albums are kind of hard to get because they are always limited in release, but I have Queen of Siam, I have Shotgun Wedding, and I also have Under the Covers. So this is now being added to my collection, and each album she does is very different from her previous albums, but this one kind of has a noir sound to it, like what you might would hear in a David Lynch movie. So there are some spoken word pieces on this as well as music, and it just really sets the mood for a gloomy, doomy type of day. And yeah, as I said, I enjoy her music, but I've also enjoyed her spoken word poetry. I've enjoyed her short films. I enjoy her podcast. I also have enjoyed the cookbook that she released a few years ago, which I think that's out of print now, but I've gone through just about every recipe in there, and it was just absolutely worth every single penny. And by the way, the Goo Goo Dolls vinyl was completely black, But with the Lydia Lunch album, it's this really, really beautiful orangish red color. So I love different colored vinyls. All right, so on to the books because, as I mentioned, we went by a used bookstore and we ended up going to Lemuria, which is a locally owned bookstore in Jackson. The used bookstore is called the Book Rack, and you can find some really, really good things there. So, everything I'm about to show off is what came from the Book Rack, which, first off, is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. Now, I read this book a long time ago and I really didn't vibe with it. But I think now that I'm older and I've matured a little bit more, I think that I could appreciate this better. And so I do want to read this again to see if it vibes with me a little bit more this time around. Because there have been books in the past where I read them, didn't really care for it, and then returned to them at a later date and ended up loving them. And I'm hoping that's the case with this. But from what I can remember, the book is centered around a woman whose father has gone missing. And in the process of her trying to find him, she discovers that this could be tied into Dracula. So, not the actual book of Dracula, but the figure Dracula himself. So, I remember thinking, really, that's the end? But as I said, my taste has changed. I think this could potentially be better, especially now that I know how it ends. Following that, since I've always been a sucker for anything that deals with reptiles, I ended up seeing this book and I have no idea what to expect. But this is Alligator by Shelley Katz. And this is one of those circumstances where I remember seeing this on the shelf when I was a kid, and it was at a used bookstore, but I never picked it up. And now that I had the opportunity to grab it again, I definitely went for it. And I really love the back cover. That is just nothing but vintage fun right there. Absolutely love it. I feel like this is definitely one of the circumstances where a book was written to jump on the money train of other man versus wild horror stories or suspense stories. And with this, it says, to the people of the Everglades, hell was green, and the devil was 20 vicious feet of flesh eating power. Many men had hunted the beast, all were dead, ripped by jaws lined with 80 razor teeth, or crushed by a lashing tail that could shatter trees. But Lee Ferris and Rye Whitman were two men who had to try. Both were death hardened adventurers, bound by a mutual hatred and a mutual need to conquer the most savage killer in Florida's green hell. So, yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. This is probably a book that I would like to read in the summer because, I mean, yeah, it's Florida. It's going to be hot as hell. I don't necessarily see someone going after an alligator in the middle of December or January. So, yeah, I feel like August would be a good time to jump into this one. Next up is a novelization that I was really thrilled to get my hands on, which this was written by Todd Strasser. Stracer? I hope I'm saying that right. Strasser. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Strasser. I'm sure I'm butchering it, so please forgive me. But the novelization of The Good Son. This is one of my favorite movies. Like, I remember seeing this as a kid and just watching it with my jaw dropped, and the intensity that it provided was just unlike anything I had seen before. And I was so happy to finally get my hands on this, which I have a good feeling the book is going to be similar to the movie since this is a novelization. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, I highly recommend that you watch the movie. It is definitely top notch when it comes down to psychotic children. And the ending, I can watch that ending a million times and still have the same reaction, which just, yeah. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor and watch it. Since we're talking about vintage books, I ended up grabbing a few that I had never seen or heard of before. And first up is The Witching by Chet Hagen. I hope I'm saying that correctly. But the cover is absolutely beautiful. That's one of the things that drew me to this. And secondly, it's called The Witching. I love anything that is occult based. So this definitely piqued my interest right away. It says on the back, Old Evil, Fresh Blood. The old man had been brutally murdered. That much was clear. But when Sheriff Strawford began his straightforward by the book investigation, he never imagined that the case would lead him into the strange and twisting byways of the supernatural. Murder follows murder until terror engulfs the picturesque Pennsylvania Dutch countryside. All right, so I had not read the back, and I'm really glad that this is focused around the Pennsylvania Dutch, as I've always been interested in them. In the past, I have read some reference books in regards to their superstitions and occult beliefs, and I've always found it interesting, and this seems like it could be fun to maybe read in the fall. Following that is an author who I had not heard of, but there is praise on the front by Dean Koontz. And since this is an older book, I really did enjoy old school Dean Koontz, but this is called While Angels Sleep by Judith Kelman. And love that cover art there. Love that. It's just so very creepy and mysterious. And there is some praise on the back by Barbara Michaels, which I've read one of her books a long time ago. I need to read some more of her. As a matter of fact, I need to revisit the book that I read of hers when I was a child, which that was called Other Worlds, I believe. But anywho, it says strange, terrible things had happened at Thornwood years ago when Emily was just a child. First, there was her mother's sudden, tragic death, then her father's slow, agonizing descent into madness, and finally, the horror had ended, or so Emily thought. Now, years later, she has come back with children of her own, back to the dark wooded seclusion of the old art colony, back to Thornwood, where the sins of the past are somehow still lingering in the shadows, lurking in the hallways, and reaching out. All right, sounds pretty good. And it does have some more praise here. One of the authors who praised it was Mary Higgins Clark, which, even though Mary Higgins Clark is a little more suspenseful than horror. I really did enjoy her book, Where Are the Children? And as a matter of fact, I think I would like to review that book for this channel in some time because that was simply a really damn good book. And this feels like it'll be good as well. I don't know why I feel this way, maybe because of how the tree appears, but I'm thinking the fall would be a great time to read this, or maybe even November since it's dealing with family and we have like family gatherings during that time. So, yeah, I'm thinking fall. And while I was having a field day with the paperbacks, I grabbed The Claw by Nora Lofts. And not really too certain what we're looking at here. I'm thinking it's ripped fabric. It says on the back, when Mary Anderson's handsome husband Greg dies suddenly one evening, she cannot bear the loss. Mary Anderson's mother, a herbalist from the West Indies, loves Mary too much to let her suffer. She puts her daughter to bed with a strong sedative, and then she goes to work. The next morning, Mary wakes to find that Greg is alive. His death must have been only a dream. A possession began it. It will take many deaths to end it. All right. Not what I was thinking. Honestly, thought that this could have potentially been about like an animal or something like that. But it says right there on the front, a soul possessed began the nightmare. It'll take many deaths to end it. So, yeah, this is just one of those things where my little ADD self saw the cover, grabbed it, and kept on going. Following that, I have Charles L. Grant's For Fear of the Night. And while I have a few of his books already, I just haven't had an opportunity to really read him, which I feel like that needs to change fairly quick. But this book says the amusement park on the pier burned down 10 days ago. A blackened skeleton of the House of Horrors is a grim reminder of summer's dreams turned to nightmares, of a young life cut short. Julie Ethler and her friends have been looking forward to one final summer of freedom before college and the responsibilities of adulthood. Now, Julie is dead. Or is she? Her voice is on Devin Graham's answering machine. Her boyfriend Tony sees her walking on the moonlit beach, and something is haunting the ruins of the House of Night. So, yeah, this actually has a lot of good praise on it. As a matter of fact, Stephen King gave it praise, and since it mentioned summer, I feel like this will be a great summer read. And the last vintage book I have is Magic by William Goldman. Now, I've seen the movie a million times, and I think that Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret are absolutely wonderful in that movie. I've never read the book, but the movie is definitely a comfort watch of mine. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, the short and skinny is a man has a ventriloquist dummy, and the more time he spends with that dummy, the more his darker side comes out. And it's very psychological, very cat and mouse. And when I saw this, I knew I had to have it. And what really surprised me though is like this is in really good condition. Like there's no tears, no markings, no writings. The pages aren't even dog-eared. So for $7, hell yeah, I am not going to pass this up. The final book I grabbed from the book rack is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. And I've heard a lot about this author, but I really don't know what to expect about the book. And it says, something hasn't been right at the roadside Sundown Motel for a very long time, and Carly Kirk is about to find out why in this chilling new novel from the USA Today bestseller and award-winning author of The Broken Girls. Upstate New York, 1982. Viv Delaney wants to move to New York City, and to help pay for it, she takes a job as the night clerk at the Sundown Motel in Fell, New York. But something isn't right at the motel, something haunting and scary. Upstate New York, 2017. Carly Kirk has never been able to let go of the story of her Aunt Viv, who mysteriously disappeared from the Sundown before she was born. Carly decides to move to Fell and visit the motel, where she quickly learns that nothing has changed since 1982. And she soon finds herself ensnared in the same mysteries that claimed her aunt. So this really feels like it's going to be moody, it's going to be suspenseful, probably more suspenseful than it is horror, but at the same time, I don't know why I'm getting this vibe from this book, but the last book I read that felt like it fit into the same category was The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. That book scared the hell out of me, and it was a perfect blend of horror and suspense. And I think that's probably what I'm going to get with this as well. So, moving on to Lemuria. Out of the books that I grabbed there, this is the first one that caught my eye. And even though I have multiple copies of it already, and what I mean by that is multiple copies of the books within this book, I knew I needed to have this because it just sparked joy with me. And yeah, I know that it's taking up shelf space, but I don't care. I had to grab it. And that is Ray Bradbury's collection of novels and stories. And this is the Library of America edition, which we have The Martian Chronicles, Fahrenheit 451, Dandelion Wine, Something Wicked This Way Comes, which out of these, I've read Something Wicked This Way Comes, and I absolutely love that story. I grew up being a huge fan of the movie, and then when I finally read the book, like about maybe 5 years ago, I totally fell in love with the book. And I do really want to read the rest of these, especially Dandelion Wine, because I've heard a lot of really good about that book, as well as Fahrenheit 451. And while I know The Martian Chronicles does have its fandom, I really haven't heard too much about those. But Fahrenheit 451 and Dandelion Wine, those are books that I will hopefully read sooner than later. Following that is a collection that I had to have because as soon as I saw this editor's name, I knew I needed it for my shelf, which that is Ellen Datlow's new anthology, Fears. And I am here to tell you, I've read a few of her anthologies before, and when you see Datlow's name, you know you are getting quality. But with this one, it says, best-selling horror editor Ellen Datlow returns with 21 stories of extreme psychological dread from horror icons such as Joyce Carol Oates, Stephen Graham Jones, Priya Sharma. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'm horrible at pronouncing names. Priya Sharma, Simon Bestwick, and more. The unsettling tales explore the nature of fear as it stirs in dysfunctional families, toxic friendships, and mismatched lovers, and accumulates in relentless stalkers, remorseless killers, and perpetrators of savage rituals. Your grandfather confesses his heinous crime to you alone. You try to save a young girl from sexual assault, but she's really not a victim. Your child is sacrificed in compensation for your social misstep. Your mom is insane. Your dad is dying. Your brother is not your brother. And you're stuck in the same house until one or all of you are dead. Far below the unlikeliness of the supernatural lives something worse, the depths of human depravity. Yeah, this is going to be solid. I do not know when I'm going to read it, but I know I'm going to have one hell of a good time reading it. Following that is a book that my good friend Misa had talked about, which is Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna von Veen. And I love the side of this because it has like a bloody side. That's really cool. And I'm happy to see books doing that again because there was a time where some books, vintage books, had that. And I'm glad we're going back to it. But it says on the back, the Netherlands, 1887. Lucy's twin sister Sarah is unwell. She refuses to eat, mumbles nonsensically, and is increasingly obsessed with a centuries-old corpse recently discovered on her husband's grand estate. The doctor has diagnosed her with temporary insanity caused by a fever of the brain. To protect her twin from a terrible fate in a lunatic asylum, Lucy must unravel the mystery surrounding her sister's condition, but it's clear her twin is hiding something. Then again, Lucy is harboring secrets of her own too. Then the worst happens. Sarah's behavior takes a turn for the strange. She becomes angry and hungry. Lucy soon comes to suspect that something is trying to possess her beloved sister, or is it madness? As Sarah changes before her very eyes, Lucy must reckon with the dark, monstrous truth or risk losing her forever. All right, that is not what I expected, but it sounds badass. Like, that seems like it's really going to be an intense ride. Um, I am not certain when this could be good to read, like for the time of year or whatnot, but I am really floored by that. It seemed the reason why I say I'm floored by it is because it sounds like it's something that I'm going to enjoy much more than what I thought I would. Because, as many of you know, I don't read the synopsis of the books that I buy. I either buy it in regards to someone having told me about it, or I get sucked in by the cover. And the first time I ever read about the synopsis is when I'm looking at You Wonderful People. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a really solid book. Next up is a book that I've seen float around online, which is Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato. And I've heard this book is comedic, but at the same time, it's frightening. So I think this is going to be fun. But it says Winfred Naughty arrives at Ensor House prepared to play the perfect governess. She'll dutifully tutor her charges, Drusilla and Andrew, tell them bedtime stories, and only joke about eating children. But long, listless days spent within the estate's dreary confines come with an intimate knowledge of the perversions and pathetic preoccupations of the Pounds family. Mr. Pounds can't keep his eyes off of Winifred's chest, and Miss Pounds takes a sickly pleasure in punishing Winifred for her husband's wandering gaze. Compounded with her disdain for the entitled Pounds children, Winifred finds herself struggling at every turn to stifle the violent compulsions of her past. French tutoring and needlework are one way to pass the time, as is admiring the ugly portraits in the gallery, and creeping across the moonlit lawns. Winifred must have patience because, as Christmas is coming, she has very special gifts planned for the dear souls of Ensor House, brimming with sardonic wit and culminating in a shocking conclusion. Victorian Psycho plunges readers into the chilling mind of an iconic new literary psychopath. All right. So I have not planned a Christmas reading list for this year. I mean, yeah, there's one or two books that I do want to read, and so those have already been included, not in the gigantic TBR that I made for myself previously, but I do have those held to the side, and this one is going to be added into that Christmas list. So I will definitely read this around November, December. Out of all of the books that I found, this is one that I was really happy to get my hands on, which that is Grady Hendrix's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. And I'm deliberately covering this part of the book up because it's signed. It's signed. Like, this is the second book I have by him signed. And check that out. Love it. Love it. Love it. And Lemuria told me that they normally receive signed copies of Hendrix's books whenever he has a new book come out. So I am totally happy to have this. And I did already purchase a copy of this, but I ended up giving that away to Connie. And yeah, I'm keeping the signed copy for myself. Love you, Connie, but yeah, this one's mine. Now, it says, there's power in a book. They call them wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grew up too fast, and they're sent to the Wellwood House in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, to give them up for adoption, and most important of all, to forget any of it ever happened. 15-year-old Fern arrives at the home in the sweltering summer of 1970, pregnant, frightened, and alone. Under the watchful eye of the stern Miss Wellwood, she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. There's Rose, a hippie who insists she's going to find a way to keep her baby and escape to a commune. And Zena, a budding musician who plans to marry her baby's father. And Holly, a wisp of a girl barely 14, mute and pregnant by no one knows who. Everything the girls eat, every movement of their waking day, and everything they're allowed to talk about is strictly controlled by the adults who claim they know what's best for them. Then Fern meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft, and power is in the hands of the girls for the first time in their lives. but power can destroy as easily as it creates, and it's never given freely. There's always a price to be paid, and it's usually paid in blood. This is going to be a lot of fun. I do still have a few Grady Hendrix books that I need to read. So far, as you've seen in the past, I've read My Best Friend's Exorcism, How to Sell a Haunted House, and The Final Girl Support Group. I've loved each of those books, and I have complete faith I will love this one as well. As a matter of fact, I have a couple of Hendrix books on the extensive TBR that I built for myself last year, so I will definitely be reading more of him. And this is something that Connie and I will read together because we have a tradition that we always read Hendrix together. We bonded very deeply over the book My Best Friend's Exorcism, and since then, if I were to read this without Connie, it just would not seem like the same experience. And since I wanted to get some birthday presents from me to me, I reached out to one of my favorite short story authors, who is Ronald Kelly, and I got Tales from the Southern Fried Crypt Volume 2, which I have the first volume already, but I needed to get some of the sequels, and so I decided this was one of the books that I needed to have. And I've read some of the stories previously in volume 1 and 2, and they're pretty damn good stories. I mean, Kelly is honestly a master when it comes down to creating short fiction that pulls the reader in with likable characters or interesting characters. And then he just sends you on a thrill ride where the entire time it's just like eating a bag of potato chips. You can't put it down. And his stories are fun, they're gory, and it's not so over the top that it would make someone lose their lunch, but it's definitely old school horror. And this is something that I will definitely love. I know I'm going to love it because, as I said, I've already read a few stories when they were previously published elsewhere. And so this is going to be solid. Also, when you buy directly from Ronald Kelly, not only does he give you these really cool stickers and stuff like that that come along with his books, but we do have a little postcard there that tells you a little bit about the author. And this is actually in regards to a book about his life. But he does sign your books, and this is what he wrote and drew in mine, which he's an artist as well. And so he drew that little cartoon gator, which I'm really happy for. But it says, "To Alex, what horrors dwell beneath the black bayou?" And that's actually one of the stories I had read. I want to say that in the story, the gator was known as Ma Gator, and it was just really, really twisted about. I don't want to give it away, but a survivor of an alligator attack ends up in its dwellings, and from there it just goes from bad to worse. It's so much fun. Okay, so I'm not going to read the synopsis on the back of these because I have not read the first book yet. And I've wanted to get into horror westerns, which this is a part of Ronald Kelly's horror western series. And that series is known as Deadeye. But this is the sequel to the first book, and it's the Saga of Deadeye, Book 2, Werewolves, Swamp Critters, and Hellacious Haunts. I'm sorry, Hellacious Haints, not Haunts, but essentially the same thing. And I don't know what happens in the first book. I'm definitely going to read that, then move on to the second and third book because, as you can see, none of these are big. And again, he signed this for me, and of course, included more artwork. That's why I love getting books directly through him, because he always personalizes them with artwork. And this says to Alex, load your pistols and ride westward. And I I think this is definitely going to have a mixture of camp, horror, and Western, which I've never really been a Western fan, but I think that this will maybe open up my horizons a little bit. Following that, we have the saga of Deadeye, Book 3, Man-Eaters, Mummies, and Murderous Maniacs. Again, I'm not going to read the synopsis because I don't want to have anything that's ruined for me. But as expected, we have some really cool artwork inside. So we have that. And it says, to Alex, into the burning desert to battle monsters and men. So, yeah, these are going to be a lot of fun. I think it's really going to open up my eyes to a different subgenre. And it's a subgenre I've been meaning to get into, but I just really haven't come across anything quite yet that's grabbed me. And since I've read Kelly before and I enjoy his work, I feel like this will be a great starting point for me. Well, that's everything I ended up with for my birthday. I wish I had more time to read, but it is what it is. These babies are definitely going into my TBR pile, and I am almost about a quarter through the TBR that I constructed for myself last year. So I am hopefully going to knock that out at least before the new year. And as soon as that gets knocked out, I'm going to go in and start adding some of these as well as other books to another TBR. And hopefully I can get to them sooner than later. But as for now, if you would care to join my Patreon or to become a member of this channel, links are available in the description section of this video, as well as links to my social media. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, be sure to subscribe and click that notifications bell, as I do have more videos coming in the near future. As a matter of fact, the next video I upload will be a review for the vintage horror novel called Ghoul by Michael Slade. So definitely stick around for that. And until we see each other again, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.